Mr. Flanagan.
First one to say, in the 2 years I've been coming here to David McNaughton, that's as good a presentation as I've heard. It was really interesting, learned a lot, and you're very passionate about it. Well done, keep it up. I'm just curious the way people here, and hopefully you can educate me, move from soya to other proteins and go like, well, there's one protein and there's another protein. And it's kind of a bit like saying, well, petrol is a liquid and water is a liquid. Sure, they're kind of the same. And my point is that there are legumes and there are proteins you can grow that don't have a very big range of amino acids. Some are missing in some areas, some are available in other areas. But a lot of the talk here today, and maybe I've missed something, seems to be that, oh, sure, just grow another protein, when it might not actually contain what you need, whereas soya does have a very wide spectrum of amino acids. I'm just curious, would lupins, which you've turned me into a fan of today, would they be one of them? Or is there a comparable out there to soya that can actually do that? Just curious about that. Thank you.
I think it's important that we understand why the European Union is importing 25 to 30 million tonnes of soya and soya meal off the world market every year. The brutal truth is that it does account for 60 to 70% of all the supplemental protein that is fed in Europe right now. Now, the hard fact is that if those boats stopped coming here from South and North America, within 3 months, there would hardly be a pig farm or a dairy farm or a chicken farm in the whole of the European Union that could continue to operate. If those boats stopped coming 3 months from now, if they stopped today, 3 months from now, we would be in deep, deep, deep trouble. That's the reality of where we are today. Now, why are we so dependent on it? And why have we been so dependent on it for the last 15, 20 years? As Mr. Flanagan has pointed out, it's the answer to that question lies in amino acid profile. Soya is conspicuously high in sulphur amino acids, and it is sulphur amino acids that make modern livestock work. The modern genetics of a modern chicken, modern pig, modern dairy cow that's on a 10,000 litre lactation calls for a huge amount of lysine and methionine. The limiting amino acid in the production of meat, muscle, is lysine. The limiting amino acid in the production of milk is methionine. Both of those are sulfur amino acids. Both of those are conspicuously high in soya. And that is why, for a lot of our high-yielding, high genetic production livestock, our broiler chickens, and so on, those animals cannot be fed on low-grade protein because they simply do not perform. They will perform, but not in line with the economic expectation of modern farming. So it's a system. It's not an easy system to unpick because the genetics of the animals is intrinsically tied to the grade of fuel that they require. You cannot run a jet engine on diesel. And the metabolism of a modern dairy cow or a modern pig is the equivalent to a metabolic jet engine. They have to run on a certain grade of fuel. Now, soya will provide that fuel. The only other crop that will emulate it, and thank you for my cue, Mr. Flanagan, is lupins, because lupins are high in protein. They have a high protein content in the region of 40%, so they can compete with the protein content of soya. Soya meal's about 44 to 47, depends on what you buy. Lupins are about 40. Peas and beans are roughly 25. That's why lupins can compete. And that's why there are certain grades of livestock that must have that quality. To understand why we're so dependent on this imported soya, it's about the required grade of quality that those animals require. We cannot simply stop feeding them soya and just start chucking peas and beans at them. It wouldn't work. Lupins can do it. It's only in the last 10 to 15 years that the agronomic problems associated with lupins have largely been overcome. To understand, by all rights, lupins should be a huge world crop, same as soya. They aren't. Why? Because it's only maybe in the last 10, 15 years that the real agronomy problems with lupin have been overcome. The question is, what do we do now? How do we fix this crazy dependency 3 months from disaster? Remember what I also said, that situation is only going to get worse. The Chinese will be taking 100 million tonne off the market in the next 5 years. Possibly, probably. We have to realise that we haven't hit the ceiling yet. We're only halfway through this problem. We need to take action right now. And the way to reduce that dependency, I've looked at all sorts of ideas. For me, the most saleable idea to the European public, certainly not, forget about GMs. GMs are a sideshow on this. The real issue is dependency. 30 million tonnes. How do we replace it? We need an integrated proteins policy. Here in Europe, that's what we need, an integrated policy. One that integrates the foliar legumes, the peas and the beans, the lupins and the soya, those 3 main grades, into an integrated policy. Because if we integrate those crops and we do it right, we can reduce our dependency on imported soya. So to answer your question, how do we reduce it? How do we move towards protein independence here in Europe? The answer is an integrated policy. We need the foliar legumes recognised for their contribution. We need the peas and beans recognised for their contribution. And we need the lupins and European-grown soya recognised for their contribution. And the way to do it is to recognise the one thing those 3 have in common. Dr. Gazowski is right. The carbon credit model is the way to go. Because you have to burn 2 litres of natural gas to make 3 kilograms of ammonium nitrate fertiliser. 1 tonne of ammonium nitrate, you have to burn 650 litres of natural gas, hydrocarbon fuel, to make that fertiliser. 1 hectare of soya or lupin will fix 200 kilos a hectare. It's the equivalent of 90 litres of diesel. And that's a better energy balance calculation than any energy crop that we are currently putting European taxpayers' money into today. We're actually supporting the wrong crops. If we want to save the planet and encourage proteins at the same time, let's go to the carbon route. That will give us the integrated policy that we need at the same time, because it will draw those 3 crop groups together under one policy for the first time ever. That's my personal view. Thank you.